From the Aba women's protest of 1929 to the activism of Funmilayo Ransome Kuti and the advocacy movements that fought for democracy, Nigerian women have always been central to our nation's progress. According to the State of Women's Leadership Report 2025, women occupy less than 5% of seats in the National Assembly and hold only 17% of executive appointments. This episode is both a mirror and a roadmap reflecting the realities of exclusion while illuminating pathways for reform. Welcome to another episode of the Leading Woman Show Season 4, themed The Nigeria We Want, brought to you by our partners, the National Endowment for Democracy and Luminate. I'm your host, Abosede Jojogan. Today, on this episode titled Women as Drivers of Nation Building, we'll examine leadership gaps through evidence and lived experiences, analyze how women's inclusion can strengthen our democracy, accelerate economic growth, and shape transformation. Join me as I welcome our guests for today's conversation. Hajia Aisha Abubakar, a seasoned development expert and former Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment with over 30 years experience spanning public administration, investment banking, SME finance, and international development. A passionate advocate for women and youth empowerment, she co-founded Tarihan Integrated Services and the Fatima Balaraba Foundation. She also serves on several boards, including Union Bank of Nigeria and Sunu Assurance. We also have Ambassador Nkoyo Toyo, a Nigerian politician, lawyer, diplomat, and development consultant with deep expertise in human rights, gender equity, and governance. She is the founder of Gender and Development Action Nigeria. In 2008, she was appointed as Nigeria's ambassador to Ethiopia and Djibouti, as well as the country's permanent representative to the African Union and the Economic Commission for Africa. She also served as a member of the Nigerian House of Representatives from 2011 to 2015, representing the Calabar Odupani Federal Constituency of Cross River State, where she championed inclusive governance and women's empowerment. Our next guest is Dr. Abiola Akiode Afolabi, a Nigerian lawyer and civil rights activist. She's the founding director of the Women Advocates Research and Documentation Center, a non-governmental organization focused on maternal and reproductive health advocacy with the one objective of promoting women's rights, human rights, governance, and the rule of law. She's the convener of Womanifesto, Nigeria's largest feminist group, serves as an executive board member of the West African Network for Peace Building and the Nigerian Women's Trust Fund. Dr. Abiola is the Dean at the School of Politics, Policy and Governance and teaches international humanitarian law at the University of Lagos. And finally, we have Chief Osasu Igbinedion Oguche, a media entrepreneur, philanthropist, and CEO of TOS Group of Companies, which houses TOS TV Network, TOS Foundation, and Natsu Global. She convenes the Osasu Show Symposium, fostering dialogue on nation building and development. As founder and executive director of the TOS Foundation, she empowers women through financial literacy and supports children's education. She currently champions the reserved seat for Women's Bill Coalition and hosts the Osasu Show. I'm sure you cannot wait to dive into this conversation. So let's dive in. Welcome to today's episode where we're discussing women as drivers of nation building. And we have a power-packed panel to have this conversation. And I'd like to welcome all of you to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really, really excited. All right. So our topic, women as drivers of nation building. Look, I want us to tell stories to kick this conversation off. So Ambassador, I want to start with you. Tell us some stories. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to story tell. It's story time. Tell us some stories and tell us some important figures who were part of that journey. I think it's important for us to know.
Well, there's a lot to be said about where women have gone pre-colonial rule. And when we think in terms of pre-colonial rule, we're thinking in terms of before the white man came. And the question for us is, was society always looking like men leading, which is what it is today? When we look at the political landscape of Nigeria, we look at men as the indicator, the kind of expression of where leadership is. But in many societies before colonial times, and that's what I think we must think about a little bit more, is the nature of the matriarch in those societies. In many of our cultural societies, there was always a role for a woman. It wasn't a question of, and I'm not naming names because I think most of the names we know about are more around the colonial times. But let's think about the cultural society in which we live, where, for example, today we talk about the issues of killings, terrorism, and all of that. In those societies, for example, where women had a voice and women were able to say, this is not the way we want our society run. I come from one of such societies. I'm Efik by birth. The Efik people live in Cross River State, Calabar. And in many communities next to them are the Ejagam people. And these are matrilineal, people who you get married to a man and your child bears the name of your biological father, you know, and that tells you how...
Biological mother.
Father. Well, the father of the mother in question, yes. Because then what they say in that culture is that you only know the mother of the child. You never know exactly who the father of the child is. And that in itself says quite a lot about the power of the woman who could actually say, I am the one who gives you the right to live, in the sense that I give you also, I bring you to the world, but I can also tell you that your father could be somebody else. And that's not the idea of being unfaithful or anything like that. It's also the idea of that control, being able to say, there is some role there that the woman who determines in the end who the father of the child is, can be power in itself. When I reflect on where we are today as a culture and a society, where increasingly we complain so much about patriarchy in the past, and yet we are seeing a new form of expression where it's no longer just patriarchy. People are saying, we hate women being in this role. Women should never have been in these roles, as we saw in the Senate recently. People don't even want to think of women in that kind of role. That wasn't the society we were born into. Just in case somebody tells you that culturally, these societies don't have any space or respect for women. Not even there. In northern Nigeria, if you look at the case of Gambo Sawaba, which is much later in time, you will notice that this is a woman in her own right, or Amina, as we hear in the legend, Queen Amina, as we read about in legendary times. You will see these were women who rose. And the question that lives with all of us is, how did those societies accommodate? At the time that we're talking about. And these were little disaggregated communities of ethnic interest. They weren't like one big country, what we know is Nigeria. It seems to me that the moment we came into a national configuration, the culture now began to be diluted and arbitrated as we began to see the places of women being taken back rather than. And don't you forget that in Africa, you go to the diaspora today, for example, you know about Omugwo. Tells you about the role of women and how powerful that is in even determining the next generation of women in power and position.
Thank you so much. Haji, I want to come to you and get your perspective on where we're coming from, and if what we're currently experiencing, where women are not in leadership positions and are at the decision-making table, has always been the case from your own perspective and your journey and what you witnessed as well?
Well, I think from if I go back a bit, I think in the early days, women were part of the decision making, but at home. A lot of the times, my father's generation, who is 80, 90 now, a lot of the decisions then, they came home, they discussed, they gave them counsel, they gave them advice, but they kept them at home, and they went out and took those advice and counsel as their own and presented it. And it even sometimes to do with implementation, when it comes to how do we execute this, or there's a problem in the office, how do we do? The women will solve it, but the men will take it out there and put it out as their own. And I think over the years, this has just become something that the men have continuously decided to take over.
Dr. Abiola, I want to come to you. Tell us the stories that you have witnessed, experienced, and that got you here.
I want to say that women have been part of the story, just as you said, right from the beginning, our independence in particular. And of course, because we know that we're coming from the colonial masters, so patriarchy has always been there. And so if you look at even the making of our constitutions from 1922, women didn't really participate. And also even the men that were participating, it was at a point when they had to demand for decolonization, to be able to even have their, voices, heard. And so one of the things that I think it's important for us to note, a lot of people speak about the independence. And so you hear about Paenauro, Awolowo, and, quite a number of men. But there are women who participated, who were part of that negotiation, for independence. And it's important. So the making of Nigeria, it's not as a result of men. It's also it's a combination of the work of men and women. So we have Manda Menson was at that meeting. Margaret Ekpo was at that meeting. Funmilayo Ransome Kuti was at that meeting. So all these women, contributed to what made up, even the negotiation, for the country called Nigeria today. And if you also look at, as we move along, not until 1979, that women in the northern part of Nigeria had the ability to vote. So, and it was also negotiated. The 1979 Constitution, where a section that has to do with gender, with sex, and all of that were included in the Constitution, was as a result of the participation of women who were at that 1979 Constitution saying we need more voices of women, within the constitutional framework. And it went all like that. We have women like Jadisola Akonde, Professor Jadisola Akonde. We had women, Adele Williams, who also became vice chancellors. We have several other women, and up until women like Madam Koyotoyo, Obieze Kwesili, NAFDAC. So there are great women, and you can imagine what the NAFDAC, Dora Okiluyi did to save the country. You can also imagine what the doctor who...
Stella Adadevo.
Yes, Stella Adadevo did to save the country. So women, so if you look at that history and you look at growth of the country from that point of view, you know that women have always played
a role
in the process.
So, Asasu, my sister, I want to come to you because you and I are in the generation that stands on the shoulders of these women who have come before us. How did you get here to do this work? And, just hearing that, honestly, gave me a lot of hope as to the fact that we're not fighting a losing battle, right? So how did it feel just to hear that? And how have some of these things shaped your own journey to getting here?
Thank you so much, my dear sister Bossade, for having all of us. The work you're doing is truly impactful, so I am honored to be here. And I am honored to also share this panel with my mothers, my leaders, the women who have paved the way for young women like myself to be here today. So thank you very much. Just as my leaders have said, women's empowerment and women's involvement in nation building did not start today. From pre-colonial times like the Queen Aminas and the Queen Edias, they showed their organizing power. They showed the strength, the resolve of what it is to be a woman. I'll share a personal example because I believe the idea of leadership is first of all shaped in the home. My mother was First Lady of Edo State for 2 terms. Edo State is the hotbed for human trafficking. When she came into office, she said, "No more. I will stand boldly and I will fight against human trafficking in Edo State." She got a lot of backlash from even the mothers of the victims who were being trafficked abroad because that was their source of livelihood. So in the papers every day, in the television, on the radio, you would see and read so many negative things about a woman who is fighting for the protection of young girls and women. So her audacity, her brilliance, her ability to lead at the forefront of such a fight really was what shaped my idea of women in leadership.
I once heard that there can be no women's economic empowerment without women's political empowerment. And there can be no women's political empowerment without women's economic empowerment. Which one comes first?
For any woman, for you to be able to stand out there, you must have an authority. And that authority means you have to understand what you're standing for. So you have to empower yourself. You have to educate yourself. You have to be ready for whatever it is that's going to be thrown back at you. I don't particularly like the word empowerment, actually. I think it's a boundary. It's limiting for women, actually. I don't like it when they say we're going to empower women. We're already empowered.
We're empowered.
We're empowered.
Ambassador, we're empowered.
Well, I think the story has been told that we are empowered in different ways, but it's where we find ourselves and what we do with the different forms of empowerment that we find. Just a bit about the history that we were running around and the stories we're telling. It is important that we remember the military. Mariam Babangida in particular. And I say this because the Honorable Minister talks about the northern women and the way in which they have tended to engage with power in the back corridors of engagements with their spouses and so on. But that has not always been the story. When you look at women like Dogonyaru, I'm trying to remember her first name now, great woman, men respected her. And if you come from a culture where you think that culture doesn't actually have women's voices in the way in which those women use those voices and power, told me something about going beyond the boundaries of the home to begin to express political power. I don't know how many of us are familiar with the work of Amina Mama. She's a professor of gender studies. And at the time, we had wonderful conversations about what we call femocracy, where it was actually a question of how the military, through Mrs. Babangida, was using that position to popularize her husband. Even if you think about that, as politics is about interest, she used the same interest and influence to actually bring rural women. I remember how unhappy people were to see your mothers from the villages and so on coming into Abuja, coming into Lagos. After the world conferences, remember there were 3-4 major world conferences that spewed the women's movement into what it is today. The first women, the second, I think she went to the second women's conference, world conference in Nairobi, and came back and made a determination that she was going to begin to be the voice of women in the country. It was a difficult, it was very difficult for her because she had to negotiate being the wife of the president, being a woman of not of northern extraction, but of northern cultural orientation, managing that dynamics and the backlash. But she held on. And today, those things make a difference.
Some of those benefits.
Yeah.
Wow, we've been having a conversation about women as drivers of nation building. We'll continue this conversation when we return from the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking about women as drivers of nation building. Dr. Abiola, I want to come to you. What are some of the urgent shifts that need to happen for us to see women fully participating in the way that we expect?
Well, there are things we need to see at the political space. We need to see more women, in the political space. It's been negotiated for a very long time, and so we've seen numbers rising. Then retention becomes a problem. So there's no way we can move forward without having voices of women where the decisions are being made. In the area of economy, we need a shift in our budgets in a way that the budgets would reflect the needs and aspirations of everyone. In the area of social, there's a need for us to do more in terms of reorientation, understanding of the role that women can play, and also a lot of support, for women in that regard. So we need to, so there are social, there are political, there are economic, and other areas that we need to shift. So we have seen laws changing. We have seen a lot of issues addressing women's economic empowerment, women's access to justice, the question of violence, and all of that. But we need a deliberate political will that is really interested in seeing that shift, happen to Nigeria. We are losing a lot. It's smart economics.
Exactly.
If you have about 50% of your population and you are not investing in them to be efficient and effective enough to be able to take the country to a better place, it's smart economics. That means we are not doing what is right.
We're leaving money on the table, literally. Osaso, I want to come to you and give you an opportunity for us to talk about the reserved seats for women bill, which you're championing. What do we need to do? Why is this important?
Our mothers who are sitting here today led at the forefront of championing gender bills similar to the reserved seats for women's bill in the 8th Assembly, in the 9th Assembly, and they're still here today working hand in hand with us, championing it in the 10th Assembly. I think they deserve a round of applause. Organizations such as mine, TOS Foundation, has pulled together a coalition of civil society members, NGOs, who are so compassionate and so dedicated to seeing the reserved seats for women's bill work this time around. What it's looking to do is to add 74 additional seats to the National Assembly and 108 additional seats across the 36 state assemblies. This was the proposal when we had started championing the bill. It went to the committee stage and the senators said, hey, 37 senators is a bit too much. Right now, we're almost 1/3 of the House of Representatives. So the new seats that you're looking to add should be a reflection of that. So they cut their numbers down to about 6 seats and said, this is what will be comfortable maybe passing. And we said, okay, as Dr. Abiola said, we're nowhere near where we need to, but we just want to have that foot in the door. So, and the House of Rep members said, hey, 37 seats, we're comfortable debating that and it might most likely scale through. So as of today, what the committee stage, which is the joint Senate and the House of Representatives, have passed by resolution at that stage are 43 additional seats in the National Assembly, then 108 across the 36 state assemblies. Why we're doing this is because women make up half of Nigeria's population, but as of today, I assume only 4% of seats in the National Assembly. 51 out of 993 seats across the 36 state assemblies are held by women. 26 out of 36 state assemblies do not even have women. In Jigawa State, the chairperson of the Women Affairs Committee is a man. So you hear stats and figures like this and you are appalled because, as you said earlier, it's smart economics to have women on the decision-making table. Men do not have the lived experiences of women, therefore cannot legislate with fairness, legislate with equity, legislate from an informed perspective of what women and girls face in Nigeria. You have no idea what it feels like to be pregnant, the troubles you go through. You have no idea when you have a suckling child who you're not producing enough milk for. So we need women on the table to bring those lived experiences. And data shows that when women are on the decision-making tables, our communities improve for it.
Willan just completed the State of Women's Leadership Report for 2025. And it is appalling, to say the least, what the numbers are. So, Hajia, I want to come to you and talk about, even in the health sector, where women are predominantly the health workers, at the leadership, it is men. Even the National Association of Nurses, where women are 80%, only 3 out of 11 in the leadership are women. In the economy, in education, where women dominate as the workforce, we still see that at the leadership level, it's men. What are the shifts? What needs to happen? So Osasa has given us one specific thing that must happen politically. What else needs to happen?
As women, we need to create the enabling environment. We have to carry each other along. We can't, there has to be an aggressive movement. It has to be intentional, has to be deliberate, strategic. Let us take hold of the key sectors. If I want to run for politics, I should imagine that I would have support from 36 states of the Federation because there's a women's movement going on somewhere. One of ours is running for office, even if it's in Sokoto State or is in Benin or wherever, but there should be something that is moving us along.
How do we turn our numbers to power?
Yes.
I say that's a question that keeps me up at night. How do we turn? Ambassador, we've celebrated you for trying and enduring. But I'm sure that at this point, you are not tired, but you are. So I want to ask you a question. If you became president of Nigeria, what would you do so that we stop telling the same stories we've been telling ourselves for years?
Thank you for that wish. And I really pray I could become president.
Yes,
I really do pray.
Why not? Why not? Our audience, you agree?
The reason I say that is that fundamentally, it's a country that even for men, celebrates a certain type of men, a total capture by them. That's why you see that the same types of leaders replicate themselves, and in replicating themselves, they're shrinking the spaces for the other alternative voices that come into the system. And I've experienced it at a personal level, and I speak from the level of my personal story. If you're a woman of a certain type, a woman who is able to stand your ground, who is able to sit with them and have a conversation, you are likely to be more excluded than included. And yet the discussion today is about being included. How do you build a country based on a culture of exclusion? The whole debate that we're having this morning is about how we are being excluded, the lack of inclusion of women. What's going on there? It's not for the lack of, to be honest with you, in every situation I have found myself, the first question I get asked is that, you Nigerian women, you are so powerful. How come you are so few? This 4-point-something% is disgraceful. Yeah. And I cannot explain it. Not that I cannot, because I've been there and I know how to explain it. It's not the lack of support from women. Why don't women support themselves? We're too few, so we are all fighting for that one single position. And so we envy each other and go and engage in unnecessary bringing down so that it will be the other person. If we had 10, 15 positions, women will not be fighting like the men have at their disposal. We fight because of that. The so-called fight, because honestly, we've been in this movement long enough to know that the fight is not real. That's why I say I wish I could be, because it will allow me an opportunity to say the things that I'm saying here. We need a different type of value system. We need a society that thinks differently. And when it starts thinking differently, then it will begin to appreciate the voices and alternative voices from women and the intergenerational nature of those voices. And I hope that one of the things I'll go away in my lifetime with is to tell the younger women, we need a different society. That's only when your voice will be respected at home, respected in society, respected in leadership, and respected in communities.
Abiola, before we go on a break and take audience questions, how can men collaborate with us and champion this? Because this is not just a women's issue.
No.
It's a collective, like all of us will benefit. The same way we're benefiting in the health workforce, in education, where women in the communities that women are powering. How can men join this? Not badges, with all due respect, and not labels of just he for she, but how can men really champion this cause?
I think that just taking from where Ambassador stopped, there is something really wrong with the system, the political system. The political class is not what it's supposed to be. So, and that's why we are. And the men also determine, the face of the political class. So it's important for us to engage. We cannot continue to run away from that engagement. Yes, the engagement will not be easy. It has to be negotiated. And that's why, like, the conversation around the reserve seats is part of the negotiation. It is not going to be sufficient. It's not going to be able to address, the problem that we are trying to solve. But we had come to a point where we had realized that for years, the 35% affirmative action by Ambassador Nkoyo Toyo in the 90s, up till now, we're still talking about it. But you see, it's happening in other countries. So you cannot say that we have the different kind of men in Nigeria. So it's happening in Kenya.
Yes.
It's happening in Rwanda.
Yes.
It's happening in other countries, So there are also African men. So it's not like, it's a marathon. So the engagement is not something that we want to see the results. So, and that's why it's progressive. So if what they are agreeing with currently is the 48 seats, yes, at least 48, if we look at where we are, 4%, if we have 48, it will take us to like maybe 10% or thereabout. We have to engage. And it is a must. So it's how we then engage to the extent that the men need to listen to us. That's what we need to then strategize.
And I think using the strategies that we know works is what we're saying. Fabulous. Okay. I think this is a great time to take a break. When we return, we will take questions from the audience.
Thank you so much for this inspiring conversation. Now, I have two questions. The first question is, how can we shift mindsets? A mindset that actually frames governance through a male lens. And my second question is, how can we prepare the next generation of girls to lead?
Wow, those are really two powerful questions. And as you respond to those questions, I want to invite you to share your closing thoughts around what would the Nigeria that women want really look like. Hajia, let's start with you.
We women, when we're doing things, we need to put it out there so that other women are aware of what we're doing, so they can come and support. Mentorship, very important. I think we need to be able to do that. Show that we can. Women have to also show that they have the capacity to be able to take positions of authority, to speak, to lead. I think women, we should not stop building our capacities, not just, I keep saying not education, but build our capacities in being able to lead, in leadership, in governance, integrity. These are areas where when people look at you and they say, I want to be that woman, I want to be like that woman. So you have to show that, you're different, and you are different. So use the inherent skills that you have to be different. And I think when there are enough of us, advocacy is very key. We have to keep advocating for what we want. And I think when at home, for example, for me at home, I have 2 children, a boy and a girl, but I don't have a boy and a girl. I have children. And I think this is one of the ways where we have to start shifting the mind. What my daughter, he goes and does the dishes. She takes the trash out. Let us make them understand that the roles today are not men and women. They're for us. It's for a purpose. And this purpose should be the Nigeria that we want. So we all have to put our hands out there.
Thank you very much. Dr. Abiola?
Well, I believe that we need to mentor young people. We need to do a lot of role modeling. And we need to engage the next generation. It's important. I believe that what we are seeing from the younger generation is also they are solution focused. They're interested in seeing a better Nigeria. So, and we have a huge population of young people who are tech savvy and who can use that technology to do a lot of things. So we need to engage, that group of people, whether at the university level, whether at secondary school level, whether at primary school level. We don't want to just stay at the elite level. We must be able to ensure that we permeate all these levels to be able to get the kind of Nigeria that we want. So what Nigeria do I want to see? And I think that's what I have been living for all my life. I started doing this when I was 13. So if I am 55 today, so it's been quite, a long time. Yeah. So the Nigeria we want is a Nigeria where everybody is secured, where men and women see themselves as the same, where we have equal ownership of the country, where both of us can contribute to the development and growth of the country. It cannot continue to be a country where poor men and women are excluded from being part of the decision of the country. It cannot be. So we want to see a country where we are both men and women championing the country. Yeah.
I'm not sure where all the time went at Bossade because I still feel like we have a lot to discuss.
And I really want you to respond to that girl question.
Exactly. And I think those are really 2 brilliant questions that were posed by audience members. When you're talking about mindset shift and role modeling, I say all the time that until you're able to envision and see the future that you want to be able to achieve, then you haven't actually started dreaming. It's important that there is an intergenerational collaboration in working assiduously to shift the mindset of our society to start to see women as co-builders of our nation. That's number 1. Number 2, young girls need to see that it is possible, that their dreams are valid, that no matter what position of power, whether in the private or in the public sector, that they aspire to achieve, that they can achieve it through hard work, through education, and through sheer determination. So I think when we're talking about a nation of our dreams and a nation that gives equitable and equal opportunity for men and women to compete and to thrive, we must start to look at using mediums like the media, mentoring platforms to start to shape and replicate, this vision that young girls, can buy into. We need to start telling stories where young girls are at the helm of leadership. So when they're watching their Nollywood movies, when they're watching skits, they see the possibility of them also assuming this level of power. So it's very important that we have laws backing women's economic participation, political participation, community participation. Therefore, women and girls can then aspire. And this bill that we're championing is just one of many legislations that need to be passed. And when we engage with senators, when we engage with members of the House of Representatives, we tell them, you're sending your daughters to school the way you're sending your sons to school, right? What if your daughter comes back tomorrow and say, they told me that I cannot aspire to be the bank CEO. I cannot aspire desire to go into politics because of my gender. Your school fees is wasted, and all the investment you've made into her. So therefore, this bill is yours.
Yes.
It's a nation building imperative and not a women's issue.
I love it. A nation building imperative. Ambassador, your closing.
So thank you so much. Just to take it from where Abiola ended, the kind of diversity we want to see in our country is a diversity that respects people for where they are, and respects you enough to allow you access based on where. There's an attempt, I think, at a Nigerianization of the way everybody responds to different things. And I speak as one who's been in the National Assembly before, where the moment something comes up, it's not my culture, it's not my this. Who says you must use your culture to Nigerianize us? Which is really what I said, the men here are different in a way, because they immediately want to put you into a sort of envelope and lock you right in there. So what this says to me is, and based on the question that was raised in my closing comments, is to come back to Abiola with a new challenge. Abiola, I think what you have, which we didn't have in our time when we were running the same course in the late 90s and into the 20s, was when we sat down, the late Jade Solakonde, I could not come to a meeting like this without mentioning her name, even started and wanted to set up a women's party for us. Later on, led us to the, we did this thing you're doing across the country. We went around the country like you did with Nikki Toby to try and influence the 1999 Constitution to see that these questions of an affirmative action, the lady was incredible. We lost her very early. And that's why we must tell our story. So the story and the lessons that all of this is telling me is you have something we don't have. Technology, the digital space. My young sister and daughter and whatever, tell your stories the way you want to see Nigeria. Start telling it today in those digital spaces. And they see one man, they carry mic. You go stand, like say they preach. He is actually breaking down some of the thinkings in the church. Who said you cannot do this? Who said you cannot do this? And he's redefining the very way in which the church community and the religious communities are actually setting us up as a society to react in another way. So my point to you is, it's not about where we are not. It's about where we ought to be. Tell that story. Whether the men, it's not also just about, oh, women can do this. It's also about what men are doing that is stopping women from being what they are, so that we can tell them the real truth about what they are. Because to be honest, when we tell some of these stories to them, they don't even realize that they're actually the barriers to where we are going, The realization in itself is an important part of the lens you are talking about and the rebuilding of the society. And I think it's something that Aboside can lead us on.
This has been such an inspiring conversation for me personally, and I hope for you too. Since women account for so much of the nation's population and its productivity, the next phase of our development must embrace full inclusion for them, whether it's in policy, politics, and across various sectors of our economy. I'd like to thank our guests who have come on the show today to share such insightful. Didn't you enjoy today's episode? Of course. And to our live audience for their incredible energy. And of course, to our viewers for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media, and share your thoughts on today's episode using the hashtag #TheNigeria_We_Want. I'm Abosede Jojogan, and until the next episode, remember, women's leadership can change everything, everywhere. Bye for now.